The same old movie turns out to be a horror show, just in time for Halloween. Hi, I'm Aaron Muller, and this is episode 16 of the Cobsmacked Podcast. This is a Nebraska Football podcast where we cover the Huskers season and team news as it progresses throughout the year. Every video episode is uploaded to YouTube, and the audio versions can be found on Apple, Google, and Spotify. If you enjoy the content, please consider leaving a like and following wherever you're listening, sharing it to your friends and family. Helps me reach more ears with the podcast. Getting into this week's recap, though, we are looking at the Week 9 matchup with the Purdue Boilermakers. Getting right into the stats, Nebraska had 269 passing with 130 on the ground for a total of 399 total yards. Purdue had 233 through the air with 116 on the ground and 349 total. That was on 58 total plays for Nebraska and 86 total plays for Purdue. The defensive stats, we had 2 sacks, 5 tackle for loss, and 0 interceptions. They had only 1 sack, 4 tackles for loss, but they had 4 interceptions. Special teams, we were 1 for 1 on field goals. We had 4 punts for an average of 41.5 yards. They missed both of their field goal attempts, went 0 for 2. They had 5 punts for 34 average yards. First downs, we had 19 to their 24. Time of possession was 21 minutes and 22 seconds for Nebraska, and they had it for 38 minutes and 38 seconds. Penalties, we had 4 for 38 yards and 3 for 30 yards on Purdue's side. Takeaways from those stats. So, watching the game, it was a letdown from beginning to end. There wasn't really a shining moment where, like, this is just not what you wanted to see from Nebraska coming out of a bye week. Martinez specifically struggled a lot. He went 14 for 29, 269 yards through the air with 2 touchdowns, but he threw the 4 picks. That's his worst performance by far. There was slow decision making, poor decision making. He had one where he was taking a tackle, or I don't know if it was a sack even, but he was taking a tackle almost on the line of scrimmage, and he pitched it forward as he's done before. He was trying to make a play on the ball, but it was just a poor decision. There was defenders all the way around that guy. Honestly, he had 1 pick six early in the game in the first half. He could have had 2. There was one early in the first quarter where he threw, and the guy just dropped it. There was no reason he shouldn't have had that, and if he did pick that, then he was off to the races for a touchdown. So he essentially could have had 1 more pick and it being another pick 6. We'll get into it later. I'm putting a lot of the negativity around this game on him, and typically I don't do that with Adrian. I usually feel like there's other things at play there, but I think this one specifically is heavily on his shoulders. The offensive line certainly didn't do him any favors in the pass protection, as they haven't all year. Keep bringing up Turner Corcoran. He lets guys by all the time, but there was a lot of moments where they did give him protection. He had all day to throw it, but he's still holding on to the ball too long. Even if they are letting guys through after about 4 seconds, he's sitting there and he's still going through his progressions at that point. He either needs to check the ball down, he needs to throw it away, or he needs to take off and run. He cannot be holding it for as long as he has been. He's slow getting through the progressions. I'm not sure if that's on him so much as it is maybe on the wide receivers not getting the separation, and he's too afraid to pull the trigger and giving the jump balls there. I'm not sure who's more to blame there, but like I said, he needs to throw the ball, throw it out of bounds, check it down, or take off and run. Those are your 4 things you should do quickly. Doesn't matter. The wide receivers looked good from what I could see. There was moments where they weren't getting the separation that you'd wish to see from them, but there was other moments where they had moments of shining glory. Toure missed essentially a touchdown pass right before halftime. That would have set the momentum going into halftime, but I think Adrian probably put it a little bit too far in front of him. I wouldn't put that one on Adrian so much. Like, I'm not going to say Adrian just missed that pass. It was kind of a mixture of he missed the pass, he might have let him too much, but then Toure also just didn't get under it in time. Omar Manning had a good day, though. He had 4 receptions for 75 yards and 1 touchdown. It was a beautiful effort to score on that touchdown. It was a 27-yard pass play. Made some guys miss, and he just ran up for the touchdown. He had a good night. Levi Falk had at least one big play that I know of. He laid out and caught one. Which I like. I've been liking watching him all year. Levi Falk is a guy that you don't hear a lot because he's not a 5-star, 4-star guy, but he's making plays when he needs to, and that's something you want to see from him. And there's always effort after the catch from him as well. The running back room looked great as well, as long as they were being used. There was moments where they weren't being used, and you were kind of questioning that. But Jacques Ziant had 6 carries for 60 yards. He had a couple nice runs that led, I believe, to their touchdown drive. He ran solidly all night. You had Ramir Johnson come in for 13 carries and 52 yards. But for whatever reason, Frost went away from that ground game in the second half. Like early in the second half, early in the third quarter, he was trying to run the ball, maybe like 5 or 6 plays. But after that, it just disappeared. We'll get into that a little bit later, but I have concerns with that. Flipping over to the defensive side of things, they did keep the score down. The score didn't get blown out of proportion. They only scored 28 points total, 21 of those coming on offense, but there was many issues that you could point out on the defensive side of things as well. They couldn't get off the field when it mattered. They allowed Purdue to get 24 first downs. They were 6 of 17 on third downs against our black shirts. So basically 50% of the time on third downs, we weren't able to get off the field. And as we've seen, they have 86 plays this game. Some of that comes off of the 4 interceptions. Obviously, that's going to make the defense stay out there a little bit more than they usually would. But 86 plays is a lot to wear on a defense. They're out there for a long time. They were out there for 40 minutes of the game. And that's happened multiple times this season where either the offense cannot sustain drives, and so the defense has to go right back out there, or in this case, it's kind of a mixture of that, and the defense isn't getting stops when they need to, or the offense on our side just keeps turning the ball over. It's kind of a mixed bag on the defensive side for Nebraska. We did have trouble with both the run and the pass coverage. It wasn't all that they were just making short passes and getting up the field and making deep balls. Their run game was pretty effective as well, and that hasn't been the case for Purdue going most of the season so far. They were averaging under 100 yards per game. They went for 116 against us. 74 of those came from their running back, King Doru. But, I mean, Damian Daniels went out with a shoulder injury. He was dealing with that all game. He kind of kept coming in for a couple plays here and there, but their 116 yards was the most that they've had in conference play, and you can't put that all in the fact that Damian Daniels was hurt. Our guys just weren't they weren't getting penetration through the offensive line. They weren't getting back to the quarterback when he was throwing it, and they weren't stopping the run at the line of scrimmage. And their offensive line isn't great by any means. They have the same offensive line capabilities that we do. As I mentioned, coming into the game, we were both tied for 21 sacks on the year, and we didn't get back to him at all. Whether that be all the throws he was doing or, they threw it 45 times compared to 41 running games. So that's not typically what you see from Purdue. Typically, it's very heavily positioned on the passing game. But since they were having success on the ground, you could see them on first and second down. They were running it, and then they were throwing it deep, kind of spreading the defense out. And as the game went on and the defense was getting tired, they ran it more and more to run clock out as well. There were some people on the defense that were having good games. Cam Taylor-Britt held up well when he was matched against David Bell. That was a big concern going into the game, that David Bell was going to be a killer. He still caught 9 passes for 74 yards, so he wasn't completely erased from the game, but he did well. Cam Taylor-Britt did well against him. One of the issues that I foreseen coming into the game, during the preview, I had talked that Deontay Williams was out with an injury, so they brought in Miles Farmer. He has experience at that position, but he doesn't have a lot of experience at that position. The coaches didn't see a drop off there, but there obviously was one. And he was targeted a lot in the game. He missed a couple where he either let the guy burn him or he just was too far away from the receiver to make a play on the ball. He kind of lost his guy in coverage, and I'm not going to put the whole pass coverage exploitation on him. It wasn't just him. There was linebackers that were out of zone. There was the man-to-man that just gave them too much space to make a play on the ball, and there was just a lot of issues on the pass coverage side of things, let alone not being able to stop the run game. And that's the issue with not being able to stop a run game, is that you'd never know. Your linebackers are going to have to push up to stop that run game, and then that kind of opens up that middle of the field for these guys to get behind them. And that was kind of an issue we dealt with all night. We weren't able to establish a consistent pressure on the quarterback. That was one of my keys going into the game. If we could establish pressure, that we could force him to make a pass he didn't want to make. We didn't get any pressure, and we only came away with 2 sacks on 86 plays. Some of that comes off of the fatigue that we had after so many snaps, but not getting any pressure back there allowed Aiden O'Connell to throw for 75% completion rate. We weren't able to force any turnovers because he was never under pressure to throw the ball where he didn't want to put it. And I just feel like, I don't know, we weren't blitzing. I don't think we blitzed a ton, but we just weren't able to get pressure. And like I said, Damon Daniels was out, so some of that comes from that center guy, that big anchor point in the middle of your defense, not being able to punch through. But you have guys on the outside that should have been getting through on this offensive line, because Purdue's offensive line is not great. Like I mentioned, they're very similar to ours. All that being said, though, I do think the Blackshirts did enough to win the game. In the second half, we went into halftime with a 3-point lead. After halftime, Purdue had 8 drives. One of them was just their ending drive of the game, where they took the knees and ended the clock. So they had 7 actual drives in the second half to score points, and they only came away with 14 points in that second half. They were helped by 2 missed field goals. The Blackshirts were. They only allowed 21 points in the whole game on the defensive side of things. So we did have a pick 6, but that's nothing the defense can do about that. So the Blackshirts holding a team to 21 points offensively, 28 points total, even with the pick 6, should be enough to win the game, especially with the offense being as highly touted as Husker offense should be, or should, potentially be. You expect to score more than 28 points, especially with, like, that's being Scott Frost's bread and butter. Like, he's supposed to be able to score points quickly too, but that just didn't happen. Flipping over to special teams now. So we had a new face as a place kicker, Chase Contreras. He made the 1 field goal that he was tasked to make, and he made the 2 for 2 on the point afters. I'm not saying that Connor Culp's done, but I mean, you had to go somewhere with it because Connor was just so inconsistent. So I'm happy to see a guy come out there. I believe they said he was a transfer from somewhere, but I couldn't find any stats for him, so he must not have played at the other school. But he did well for us. He came out there and he seemed confident in his kicks, and he put it where it had to go. William Pristup again had averaged over 40 yards per punt for us. He's been consistent since that Oklahoma game. I think, like I mentioned, from watching every game after the Oklahoma game, it seemed like we just had one bad night. Not the Oklahoma game, Michigan State game. We had one bad game against Michigan State, and it just happened that both of our punters had bad nights that night. But Pristup's been coming out, and he's been consistent since then. Connor Culp did come in at one point in the game. He did the onside kick right at the end, and we nearly had it. It went right through Cam Taylor-Britt's hands on the 10-yard, like where it had to be. But it went right through Cam Taylor-Britt's hands. He just didn't get his hands closed, didn't come down with it, and they recovered it. But whenever a game comes down to that, I don't like relying on an onside kick because your chances are low anyway. But whenever a game comes down to an onside kick, that means that the team failed elsewhere in the game. I don't like that people are like, oh, we were so close. We shouldn't have never been in that position to begin with. Overall, the offense struggled mightily once again. Adrian gets the sole blame from me here, as I mentioned earlier. I love him as a human being. He's a great guy. He's a great person to talk to. He's the podcast. I love listening to a podcast. He's very intelligent, and he's a competitor. He wants to win. I certainly won't put all the offensive woes on him. Like, the offensive line did struggle, yes. One interception came from Austin Allen. He kind of just didn't grab the ball, and it popped up, and the other guy, defender, grabbed it. So I can't put the loss on them, though. I think if Adrian didn't have such a poor performance, we probably don't lose this game. Even as close as it was, without 4 turnovers, I don't see us losing this game. I just didn't see enough from Purdue. Purdue did not win this game. Nebraska lost this game, and that's been the case way too often this season. But Adrian has a terrible track record of leading a team to a victory, especially in crunch time. He consistently crumbles when the game is on the line and he has to go down the field and score. He fumbles it. He throws interceptions. He makes bad decisions. That's not because he doesn't want to win. I feel like people are saying, like, he's a bad athlete. He's a bad quarterback. I don't think he's a bad quarterback, but he's just not a crunch time guy. And that's kind of what we need with all these close games. The running game was having success, as I mentioned, but we didn't see much of that in the second half, and I don't know why that was. We ran 26 plays in the second half. 10 of those were rushing plays. One of those was a QB scramble. So you had 9 designed running plays in the second half, and only 6 of those was by the running back. The rest of those were Adrian. So you had 6 running back runs off of 26 plays in the second half. The other 20 plays were all pass plays. I don't understand that. If we were having success in the first half running the ball, why did we only run it 6 times with the running backs in the second half? Specifically in the fourth quarter, we had 15 plays over 4 drives, and there was only 1 run play in that whole thing, and that was Adrian Martinez. There was no running backs running in the fourth quarter, and again, I don't understand that. We were down, so I understand you're usually passing that situation, but we still had 10 minutes left in the game when we got the ball. Adrian went 7 for 14 on his passes, 2 interceptions, and 1 touchdown. So he could have used the run game there. I mean, he was obviously struggling. 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter is going to seal the deal for most teams anyway. But I was kind of confused by Frost's post-game comment on this. When he was asked, why did you go away from the running game? He says, I'm not sure. We're going to have to look at the film. There's probably more to that, and I'm just not well-versed enough in coach talk to know what he means by that. But when he says, I'm not sure, why do you not know why you went away from the run game? Are you the guy that made that decision? I understand you kind of split offensive coordinator capabilities with Matt Lubick, but how do you not know why you're not running the ball? He did mention that he wanted to run it early in the half, which they did. They ran it like 5 or 6 times over a 2-series period, but after that they just went away from it completely, especially the running backs. Adrian had a few running plays scrambled in there, but your running backs were having success. Yant was running an average of 10 yards per play or per carry. Ramir Johnson had 4 runs or yards per carry. And Ramir looked good again. Yant looked good again. I don't understand why if they were having success did you go away from it. That kind of sets up the pass game too. So if you run well in the second half, that sets up Adrian to have more open receivers because more of their defenders are pushed down on that. I'm sure I'm mislooking at that somehow. I'm misinterpreting what he meant by that. But looking forward, what does this win-loss mean for us? I honestly don't know. I thought about this last night. I'd actually pulled up most of the stats and then wrote most of this preview or recap last night right after the game, and I was frustrated by the game. I wanted to record it last night, but I just wanted to kind of sit and simmer on how I felt about it because I've been so supportive of Adrian Martinez and Scott Frost that I mean I still am supportive, but at this point it's a little more fluid. It's no longer a solid like Frost can fix this. Frost will fix this, or Adrian is the guy. We just need to put all of our trust in him. I don't like all of the Fire Frost mobs that inevitably form after every loss. I don't like seeing that. But my ride or die attitude with Adrian has started to fade. I didn't think that would be the case. I always looked at his athleticism and what he brings to the game, and I'm like, how can you discount what he brings to a game? But once again, it's his inconsistency. His consistent inconsistency. It's not that it just happens once in a while, which it happens to everybody, but it's consistent with him every time. Fourth quarter is like his worst quarter of the game, and that's just not what you want from a quarterback, especially when the game gets close. I'm assuming that we're still going to see him going into the Ohio State game just because, as Frost says, whoever has the best week of practice, whoever gives us the best chance to win. Adrian does probably give you the best chance to win, but like at what point does his fourth quarter fumble, interception, poor decision making come into play when you're making a decision on who to start? If we lose the Ohio State game, and that's the final nail in the coffin for the bowl hopes, there's no more chance to get into a bowl game, do you bring in Smothers for those last 2 games to get him experience for next season? Is it time to bring Smothers in? You've been hearing a lot about him, and there's kind of a mixed bag of people saying that he is good. From what you see on him on tape and what you hear about him in practice, like he's quick, he's intelligent, he's making the right throws when he needs to, and he's a good quarterback. But other people think that there has to be a reason that Scott hasn't gone to him already. If Adrian was hurt and they weren't putting Smothers in, I mean, that was kind of a concern I had when we watched the Minnesota game and you've seen how poorly Adrian was able to manage the offense. Why did they not put Smothers in? If Adrian was hurt, was he not a better option than an injured Adrian? Or is Scott's loyalty to Adrian, and I understand the loyalty there. Like, Adrian has done a lot with Frost, and Frost has done a lot for Adrian. But at some point, you have to look at the product that's being put on the field, and Adrian might bring a lot to that product, but he's also crippling the end result. And that's it. So at what point do you bring Smothers in and at least give him a chance? What do you have to lose by bringing Smothers in for those last 2 games? Adrian has experience. Smothers needs the experience if he's going to be starting next year. Even if Adrian comes back, I feel like there's a big chance that Smothers is going to get playtime next year, regardless. The last 4 games were supposed to tell us a lot about how much actual progress had been made this season. We keep saying that there's progress. You see improvement. These last 4 games were supposed to show it. You had bye week, 2 games, bye week, 2 games to end the season. We came out of a bye week and we played probably the worst game of the season. I said that last week, a last game against Minnesota, that was probably our worst game this season. We come off of a bye week where you have 2 weeks to prepare for this game. You're supposed to look as sharpened as you have all year, and you looked the worst. How else are you supposed to take that? How do you... I can't wrap my mind around that. I can understand losing off of a bye week. That's not that's not crazy. Coming out and putting your worst performance out after you've had 2 weeks to kind of work on it, I don't understand that at all. I don't understand how that happened. I'm just at a loss here. I just don't know what this means going forward. We had 4 games to show the actual progress was being made. Now the last 3 are going to be even more heavily scrutinized for that reason. Bowl games really kind of hinged on the Purdue win, and without the win, now we have to beat Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Iowa. All still ranked teams. Iowa could still technically be top 10. Ohio State's still in the playoff conversation. Technically, we could win out. Technically. We have 3 games. Technically, you could win that. But realistically, no. I don't. It's not. Ohio State by itself looks immaculate. They lost the opening game to Oregon, and they just looked untouchable in the Big Ten since then. They kind of sit way atop the pyramid of the Big Ten. Every other team below them is trying to play to see who's going to play Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. We are not that team. The Huskers, to me, looked defeated at the post-game presser. Jojo Doman was still in pads, still in his face paint, and he was emotional, very emotional, coming into the post-game comments. It hurts, and it hurt him. Like he's just flat out said that it hurts me. He doesn't. I think he doesn't know what to do at this point. All of the words that should have been said or could have been said to motivate this team, both player-wise and Scott Frost-wise, he made the same kind of comment. He said, "I kind of let the captains have the locker room this loss." Because what else can he say at this point? I don't think. And he made the comment too. Scott Frost made the comment that I shouldn't have to motivate this team. Great players don't need motivation from the head coach. And that sounds kind of odd when you think about it as a head coach, like that's your job. And he said that's my job, to motivate them. But at some point, the player has to take that upon himself to motivate himself to win games, motivate himself to get better. And between Scott Frost, Jojo Doman, Adrian Martinez, Austin Allen, none of those guys had answers. And I don't either. I don't have answers. I don't even know exactly what question I'm searching for anymore. It's just what's going on? Like why? Why is the only question? And there's so many answers to that, and none of the answers can be found. And that's not a good sign going into the biggest Big Ten game of the season. Having your guys look defeated and out of answers. How do you fix something you don't know what's broken? I have no words for this. But we will be back here on Wednesday for the preview for the Ohio State game. As unpretty as that might look, maybe my mood will change like it usually does during Husker football season, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is going to have to be pretty magical for me to be positive going into that one. For now, though, that's going to wrap up this recap. Do you think that it's time to give the backup Smothers a chance, or even one of the younger guys you've been hearing a lot about? Do you think it's time to give one of them a chance to spark the offense? If Adrian starts to struggle halfway through that Ohio State game, if he throws a pick or two going into halftime, you have nothing to lose putting Smothers out there. Nothing at all. If we lose the game, we lose the game. But we were going to lose the game anyway if that's the trend it was going. I have no idea. We could talk about this. We'll talk about it more on the preview. Comment below. Find me on Twitter at Cobsmacked Pod. But until next time, go big.